This money laundering case was trending for quite a while, and even today it remains one of those "how did these guys pull it off?" Many people still don't understand how the self-made Nigeria's Instagram billionaire, the billionaire Gucci master, and Kenya's Abdulrahman Juma were able to sink Nigeria's super cop and steal a whopping $1.5 million from a Qatari's billionaire school founder. Well, we have all the juicy details right here. On the 10th of June, December 2019, we were reminded never to trust what people post on Instagram. Because even when it all seems real, there are often too many lies behind the lives and the faces of the people flexing their wealth on the platform. You really shouldn't feel bad about where you are in life. These life lessons aside, we were also introduced to the world of fraud courtesy of @Hushpuppi, whose legal name is Ramon Abbas, but otherwise goes by Hushpuppi, Ray Hushpuppi, and in most other instances, the billionaire Gucci master. But what was the big deal about this? Hadn't Hushpuppi made it his life's goal to post his life of luxury on Instagram? Well, on the 8th, Hushpuppi posted a photo on Instagram. In it, he was lounging on his Rolls-Royce's hood. His outfits? Over-the-top designer clothes, designed by Virgil Abloh, the legend himself. He had on a sky blue pants and shirt set, with some sort of white cloud that seemed to float across his midriff and forearms. The Rolls-Royce was parked on the driveway of Dubai's Palazzo Versace, the resort-style hotel Hushpuppi lived in at the time. He lived in the penthouse apartment. So, for this 37-year-old with a rags-to-riches story meant to inspire the masses, he grew up in one of the poorer parts of Lagos, but was celebrating a life of private jets and celebrities for friends in his adulthood, and his brand was all about selling this image. He captioned this photo with the words, "I don't believe in competition, you're not me, and that's it," followed by the power-packed Louis Vuitton, Rolls-Royce, and Off-White hashtags, the flexing billionaire narrative, really. But this is not what made the news. The events that ensued later on are what broke open the case and revealed what made Hushpuppi, Hushpuppi. On the 10th of December 2019, Hushpuppi's partner in crime, Abdulrahman Juma, contacted Hushpuppi, clearly after a long period of time, informing him that they had a scam already in play. Juma painted the next target of the thriving scam enterprise as this gullible but wealthy investor who they'd be able to squeeze every last penny off him easily. But Juma needed Hush's expert help on the venture. Hush was, after all, an expert fraudster, and he had defrauded people across the globe and had never been caught. So, with the promise of a good amount of money coming his way from this new deal on the horizon, and his insatiable greed, Hush agreed to be part of the scam deal immediately. They hatched a plan. Hush's, Abbas, part in the deal was to facilitate the scam under the guise of a Wells Fargo director, Malik, based in the US. He would also assemble a team in the United States. They would help set up the necessary documentation to ensure that the wealthy Qatari man trusts them and for the successful execution of the plan. These documents included a legitimate bank account, business names, and tax information, among other necessary documentation needed to paint a picture of a legitimate business with which the Qatari man would be conducting business. Unfortunately, despite this complex logistical aspect of the scam being laid out perfectly, the two couldn't agree on how much each would take home after they succeeded in their new scam. According to text messages that the FBI obtained, Hush's proposal regarded how to split the money. If they'd make $150,000, he'd take home $50,000, while Juma and his team would take home $100,000. Juma agreed to this proposal, and with his agreement, the second phase of the scam was a go. This second phase proved that all the wheels were moving in the right direction when the Qatari businessman sent $150,000 to a Kenyan law firm, Okach & Partners Law Firm, to facilitate the release of his $15 million loans. After sending the cash to Juma, Juma informed the Qatari businessman that the next steps would be handled by Mr. Malik, the US bank CEO. He contacted him with a solution to his $15 million problem and to ensure that the transfer of the same sum of money to his account. Having been notified of this, Mr. Malik, Red Hushpuppi, playing a Wells Fargo director, was ready for his next moves. This time, Hush was not clad in the flashy Instagram-ready designer clothes, but in a clean-cut suit as expected of a corporate CEO. But just before making the call to the Qatari guy, Hush knew that more work needed to be done to ensure that the con was airtight and there were no loopholes, especially with the large sum of money that was involved. Hush needed to cover all his bases, and this is where the third player was ushered in play. Guy number 3 involved in the scam was a man named Vincent. Vincent was a Turkish man from New York, but he wasn't a man who ran in the same groups as Hush or Juma. Vincent was the next big guy that was to be feared by anyone. He was the guy you call in when you need to intimidate someone. Vincent has been in the underworld gangs for long, and though he'd been involved in several scams previously, he was never at the center of the scams, all thanks to his expertise. Vincent was a highly skilled tech guy whose intimate knowledge of the inner workings of tech systems in and out of the financial scene allowed him to make smoke where there was no fire, and mirrors that would make anything he created believable as the absolute truth. Some things Vincent did include creating fake bank websites with fully integrated and fully automated phone lines, all designed to enhance the credibility of the story he was going to sell to the Qatari businessman. Hush's gang would then use these fake website emails and phone numbers for all communications with the businessman they were defrauding. More specifically, the phone lines and emails would convince the Qatari investor that they had secured his $15 million. As this was ongoing, Hush and Juma figured they'd squeeze even more money from the Qatari investor, so they made up stories and came up with ever cleverer gimmicks to get their victim to send them more money to the newly created US account and also to the Kenyan account. On December 11th, Hush emailed the Qatari investor, introducing himself as the Chicago-based Mr. Malik, Wells Fargo director. In this phone call, Hush insisted that his bank was keen on assisting him in transferring the loan amount to his account at the Qatar National Bank. In this part of the transaction, the Qatari investor of the importance of trust, where such huge financial transactions were involved, mentioned that he'd prefer talking to the bank manager on the phone rather than by email. Hush had anticipated this, but didn't have an immediate plan. And as he was aware of how his words controlled the play, while making sure their victim didn't smell any dubious dealings going on, he made sure that he sounded as legit as possible. Now, while a phone call is convincing, how did Hush conceal his heavy Nigerian accent? Just watch one of his videos on Instagram. There's no way that accent could ever sound American, and it wouldn't sound like a Chicago native was speaking. So for this play, Hush brought into play a new guy, Anifawashi. On December 16th, Hush texted Anifawashi, who at the time lived in New York. Although Anifawashi was Nigerian, he'd lived abroad in the US for many years, and his accent was non-existent. In the text, Hush read in Anifawashi on the part he was to plan. He was to call the Qatari businessman, posing as Mr. Malik, the Wells Fargo bank executive, in a position to sort out his $15 million loan problem that had resulted in his money being frozen. However, given the complexity of the process, the Qatari investor would have to open a US bank account from which the money would be easily wired to the investor based in Qatar. He convinced them that doing this, with the help of Mr. Malik, would save him the time and painful process of opening a bank account in person in the US. The Qatari businessman and investor agreed to these terms, and the bank account was immediately set up in his company's name. He was satisfied with the process and level of attention he'd received from Mr. Malik, the investor, allowed things to run their course. During this time, Hush reported to Juma that things were going well. The Qatari businessman reported the same to Juma via text, informing him that he'd spoken to the US-based Mr. Malik and that he'd been asked to set up a US account. Then the $15 million would be transferred to London after it had been cleared from the US account. With all teams in agreement, there's no doubt that this was a con very well executed. So, to ensure that there were no flyaways in their agreement, Hush instructed Anifawashi to set up a legitimate business name statement with the LA County Registrar Recorder County's clerk's office, and then to open a bank account under the Qatari businessman's company name. All vital information that would allow their tech guy, Vincent, to create a credible, durable power of attorney for the 20 documents necessary for their official documentation. For this, Vincent used the templates available online and then printed the high-quality documents, ending up with fraudulent but legitimate-looking documents, albeit to the untrained eye. Once this phase of the con was done, Hush contacted the Qatari investor to keep him apprised of the progress. At this point, the Qatari businessman had a real business registered in the US alongside a bank account that would hold all his $15 million. But hold your horses, that's not exactly what had happened. What actually happened is that Hush and Anifawashi had registered a company whose name was similar to that of the Qatari businessman's company. They used these details to open a bank account in Wells Fargo's Carnegie Park branch, located in California. And to make the whole thing seem legitimate, Hush sent the durable power of attorney to the Qatari businessman, asking him to transfer his power of attorney over the bank account to allow him to log into his account and transfer the funds. At the same time, Hush sent the businessman the online login information, asking him to log into the account. With one of their biggest payoffs simmering, Hush needed to create a legitimate bank account that would receive the funds from the Qatari businessman. Hush understood that this was necessary because while, in the past, scammers would use bank account details obtained fraudulently, albeit under their control, the banks were putting strict measures and restrictions on the amount of money that would be wired to banks safely without raising any suspicions. So, with a fast approaching payday and the need for a quick fix solution that they would back out of easily after their payday, Hush contacted their other numbers guy, Bolatito Agbabiaka. While Agbabiaka didn't have any mule accounts at the time, the prospect of a massive payoff with minimal effort incentivized her, and she opted to give Hush the details of her account, which Hush would use to receive the money. Agbabiaka held a bank account at Capital One, and her account details included her real name, the routing number, residential address, and her bank's address. With these challenges dealt with, Hush made a call back to Juma, the idea inceptor. In the call, he explained to Juma that he'd come up with another scam to squeeze another $250,000 out of the Qatari man, and that this money would be used to fund a US-based investor account. So, the next day, Hush was back on the phone with Anifawashi. He directed him to call the Qatari man, informing him that it would be impossible for them to send the entire sum of $15 million to his personal account that they'd opened, since the account needed would only be activated if it had a minimum of $250,000. That would also help to clear the other huge fees associated with the account. At this point, Hush had pushed things too far, and the Qatari businessman sensed that there was something terribly wrong going on. He suspected a long con. Often in long cons, the victim gets to a point where they see red flags, and that is usually the best time to get oneself out of the deal and salvage whatever you may be left with. It is, however, surprising to see how many people still fall for the little and big lies peddled by the con artists. By the time one realizes what had happened, they're usually too far down in the hole, consoling themselves that whatever the con artist is selling will ultimately pay off. So they keep digging the hole, giving out more money. So at the request of $250,000, the Qatari man got hesitant, insisting that he must speak to Juma. He soon received a call from Juma in Nairobi, who was also taken back by the new move by Hush, since he'd not been looped into the new plan requiring $250,000 to be wired to the Qatari investor's US bank account. Angered by Hush's actions, and aware that Hush and his co-conspirators in the US may sabotage their plans while double-crossing him, he asked the Qatari businessman not to wire the funds just yet, as he needed to clear the air on some things with Mr. Malik, Hush. He confronted Hush via text and asked him if he was planning to muscle him out of the deal, and if not, how much would he, Juma, make out of the new deal? Hush assured Juma that all was well, and that after the $250,000 was wired, he'd receive his share per the initial sharing agreement. He'd get a third of the payout. Hush concluded the conversation by telling Juma that the money would be wired through two mules he'd contacted and had worked with him in the past, both based in Nigeria. The two would receive the $250,000 on his behalf, then take out their share and send the rest of the money to him. But as it appears to be the standard practice, these three couldn't agree on how to split the money, since Hush's mules demanded 50% of the money, which Hush saw as a ripoff. Unable to find a mule to receive his money, Hush contacted a Florida-based watchmaker and requested him to make him what would be his most flamboyant purchase yet, the Richard Mille RM1103 watch. On December 23, 2019, the watchmaker sent Hush a couple of photos of the Richard Mille watches, each with its price, including the $265,000 full rose, the new rose gold titanium worth $230,000, and the new full rose Richard Mille watch worth $275,000. Even with these ridiculous prices, Hush couldn't take temporary setbacks to heart. So after he ironed out his differences with Juma, he set out to celebrate his new win, settling for the Richard Mille rose gold and titanium RM1103, worth $230,000 from the Florida watch shop. The watchmaker sent him a Wells Fargo bank account number to which the payment would be made. Naturally, the billionaire Gucci master was only days away from owning a rare and one of the most valuable watches that would significantly raise his status on Instagram. So, did the money come? And how did the numbers guy come into play this time around? Well, since Hush knew that the only way for the payoff to get to him was by routing the money into a legitimate bank account, he contacted his numbers guy, who sprung into action immediately. The numbers guy, Fashola, along with Agbabiaka, started looking for US-based bank accounts that would receive huge sums of money from Qatari without raising the alarm. To pull this off, they oiled the wheels of their classic, old-school grifter operation. This meant identifying individuals in the US willing to let you use their bank accounts to receive some money. These individuals will often note that their bank accounts weren't cleared to receive huge sums of money, and for their troubles, Hush co-conspirators would promise them a cut of their dealings. Together, they became workhorses, searching for bank accounts daily. Whenever they came across potential bank accounts, they'd forward Hush the account holder's details. That is, the account holder's name and address, the bank name, the routing, check, and account numbers, as well as the bank's SWIFT codes. But with the enormous demands of this job, essentially, they were expecting a huge sum of money within a very short window. Agbabiaka provided her details in the list for the money to be wired in from the Qatari businessman. When he finally found an account that would receive the money, the wheels started to move again. Alongside Juma, they sent the account information to the Qatari businessman. Through endless and empty promises, these two fraudsters convinced their victim to wire the funds to the bank account they had identified. As soon as the money hit the US-based accounts, Fashola and Agbabiaka would swing into action. They withdrew the money immediately through wire transfers, cash withdrawals, teller transfers to other accounts, and they even issued cashier's checks. By using different withdrawal methods, they aimed to conceal the nature, location, source, and owners, while gaining control of the funds obtained fraudulently. But that was not all. They still had work to do. It is a long con, remember? Then came Christmas Day. Yes, con artistry takes no days off. On this day, Hush and Juma contacted the Qatari businessman again, this time asking for $330,000 to be deposited in two US bank accounts. Agbabiaka's Capital One account that would hold $100,000, and the second account was the watchmaker's account at Wells Fargo. That was to receive the $230,000. The Qatari investor wired the money on the 26th of December 2019. As soon as the money hit Agbabiaka's account, she withdrew $7,100 to an unregulated money exchanger that would transfer the money in Nigeria's Naira into a Nigerian bank account. Hush then asked Agbabiaka to make a further withdrawal of $20,000. But, having done this before, Agbabiaka refused to make the withdrawal because it was too soon, and the sequential significant and quick withdrawals always raise suspicion. All this time, Hush had successfully kept the rest of his thieving team abreast of what was happening. He sent Anifawashi a picture with confirmation of the successful transfer of the $230,000 to the watchmaker's account. Also a photo of the watch he was getting, lying to him that he'd buy it later. Yet, it had already been paid for at the time. He also sent him a confirmation picture of the $100,000 received on the other account. This made Anifawashi ecstatic. He'd worked with Hush for a long time on such scams, and they'd never been arrested. So, when Hush asked him for advice on what he should spend the $100,000 on, Anifawashi recommended the Audemars Piguet luxury watch. This watch retails at $150,000 to $200,000. On December 27, 2019, Agbabiaka withdrew $10,000 from her Capital One account using cashier's check and deposited the cash in a different bank account. With this big win and no cops in sight, not to mention his hunger to flex and rub shoulders with the rich, Hush decided that it was time for him to acquire a second citizenship, as having multiple passports was the norm for multimillionaires who end up receiving exclusive benefits to many countries. So, the billionaire Gucci master opted for St. Christopher Nevis, St. Kitts and Nevis, an island country located in the West Indies. This passport would allow him entry to over 100 countries in Europe and the Caribbean, passport-free. But he didn't just choose this passport because he would like to be able to travel the world. He did it because, like the wealthy, this passport meant a tax-free life with no taxes on wealth, income, or inheritance. Also, it would be easier for him to gain citizenship and second passports for family members, and the country is generally small and very peaceful. The benefits of dual citizenship are also appealing, not to mention the vast array of real estate investment options available, free movement within the CARICOM, and the 3-month processing time. With all its power, it is a highly regarded passport, and very few people have it. The passport sets you back $250,000. So, on his way to the richness, Hushpuppi determined that he needed to get his hands on this passport, and he even contacted an agency to get started on the process. On New Year's Day, Hushpuppi did what he did best. He went on Instagram and gushed over his success, even crediting God. He captioned the post, "The God I serve doesn't want me to struggle. That's why I be ballin', again." This was followed by the flashy hashtags Chanel, Fendi, Versace, and Ajaya. Then on the 3rd of January 2020, he updated the followers of his new acquisition by posting the flashy $230,000 Richard Mille RM1103 watch that was still at the jeweler's. At the time, he was living in heaven, enjoying the Gucci life, as he liked to say, but he didn't know that the chips were just about to fall. Soon after this, as the FBI tightened their investigations, a Nigerian cop involved in the syndicate was arrested, with Hushpuppi pleading guilty on April 20th, 2020, while Fashola and Ifewashi and Agbabiaka were arrested on July 22nd. At the end of the scam, they had defrauded the Qatari businessman close to $800,000.